3 years old when the agreement was signed?
I was 5 years old.
5 years, but still. So you'll be 26 now. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
That's good.
But it's good to have you, man. Thank you for all you do. I mean, even though you're not actively involved in politics, but you've been very engaged on some very national issues. I want to say thank you and keep on the good job.
Thank you.
Okay. So yes, so I mean today we have with us former Senator Komini Wise. The comprehensive Accra Peace Agreement, the CPA, was signed on August 18 in 2003, and that document was very pivotal to ensuring that we end the Second Liberian Civil War after 14 years of devastating conflict in our country. And so the peace agreement was negotiated in Accra, Ghana on the auspices of the Economic Community of West African States, that's ECOWAS, with support from the United Nations, the African Union, and other international actors. So, yeah, of course, the CPA was very key to ensuring that we all enjoy the peace we are enjoying today. But, I mean, before we get started, I mean, how was it during the formative stage of this whole peace agreement? How did it come about? How was it birthed?
Well, I would say Liberians began the process just as the war started. The war started, was in December.
Yeah, 1989.
1989. You were not born at that time.
That's your history.
And I'm really happy that you were handling this program because quite a number of people really who were not alive or who were not born, like many of our children, have a way of just dismissing whatever happened and make demands that don't make a lot of sense and demands that maybe make sense to them, but basically not because they are ignorant, it's because they just don't know.
Sure.
So that's what one we have to say. We say that war started and it took 14 years before we came to signing this comprehensive peace agreement. 14 years of war.
Former Senator, can you share with us your role in the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord and how did it contribute to peace in Liberia today?
I went to that conference, having participated, having organized, helped to organize a conference in Ouagadougou, which was exactly 1 year before the Accra, before the Accra meeting.
Okay.
And that was that meeting that brought together the warring parties at the time. First time that we were able to get all the warring parties together with political parties at a meeting in Ouagadougou. And it's significant to note, Ouagadougou was one of the main support of Mr. Charles Taylor. Blaise Compaoré and the Libyan support came through Blaise Compaoré to Mr. Taylor. To agree for us to work to have that meeting, it took a lot of negotiations.
Did that meeting give birth to that whole CPA that was signed in Accra in 2003?
It was a full runner.
Starting point.
It was a full runner.
Okay.
To the meeting in 1 year later.
Okay.
It was a full runner to that meeting in Accra. But before that meeting in Accra, there have been several meetings.
Okay.
Different types of agreements have been signed, and
it didn't yet yield as a result until
it did not.
2003.
It did not until the 2003. But what softened the 2003 was that meeting in Ouagadougou.
Okay.
Because this time now, the key support that came through Ouagadougou was no more.
Okay.
And thanks to the work of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the work of Amos Claudius Sawyer, Dr. McLean, some of them are dead now. Dr. Tipote and others played different roles. In fact, we just heard about the passing of Honorable Cletus Watterson.
Yes, the former senator from
where
Grand
people
Crew.
at different points who played different roles for that meeting in Ouagadougou to take place. So it was after that meeting And ECOWAS participated in that meeting. And as I said, the support to that meeting came from the one who raised the money for that meeting to take place was Mr. Sully.
I mean, it's over 21 years now.
So
former senator.
1 year later,
Mhm.
we had a meeting in in Accra.
Okay.
In Accra, when I went to that meeting, the same organization that I headed, that
How
was
was it?
called the Liberia Leadership Forum,
Okay.
which brought together the Center for Democratic Empowerment that I was executive director of, Dr. Sawyer was chairman of, and a couple of other local organizations. Then were the one that I represented in Accra as a civil society body
Okay.
called the Liberian Leadership Forum. A colleague of mine, a very good friend of mine, called Sir Philip Joe,
Okay.
headed the civil society movement of Liberia. There were the women organization, the bar association, the number
So it
of
was a
other groups,
conglomeration of
of
everybody
several groups
coming together.
that came together.
Okay.
But the agreement, important to keep in mind,
Mhm.
that the war, those who carry arms in the war were at that time.
Mm.
We have done different agreements
Okay.
that brought Chancellor to power. We ended those agreements, but they were broken. And then the new groups of fighters organized themselves that included the government of Liberia, Taylor's forces that were organized, even though the NPFL was supposed to have been dissolved, but it wasn't dissolved. When Taylor won the elections,
yeah.
his forces began to constitute themselves as the government forces. So other groups decided to fight against this.
Great.
And that included the LEARN, the Liberia United for Reconciliation and Democracy.
Mm.
And there was another group
Mobile.
called the Movement for Democracy in Liberia.
Mm.
So these three became the armed groups that were now fighting, where arms were exchanged. That group, those three groups, the first thing that needed to be done was a ceasefire.
Mm.
In order for the negotiations, the political negotiations to take place, you needed a ceasefire. So those groups sat down, and under the guidance of ECOWAS played a key role, the United Nations, and of course, the key
AU,
states
yeah.
that were, that were leading and putting a lot of resources into this matter.
Great. I mean, even
so that ceasefire was
honorable former Senate
was January 17.
Mm.
But we did not have the CPA until August 18.
Why did it take so long?
Exactly. One of the key issues, and that is why it's critical, when we hear all these debates about war crimes code and so and this, that, and the other. After the ceasefire, we were doing all the political negotiations. The warring factions, civil society groups were saying, we got to take all the warring factions to war, to the war crimes court. We began to talk like that.
Mm. That was not solving the problem.
So from June 17, we continued the negotiations because we're going nowhere. The warring factions that held the guns say you want to take us to court. So therefore, you can take us to court, we'll go back to war.
Mm.
And that was why it took so long until the compromise called the Transitional Legislative, the TRC, until the TRC was agreed upon as a compromise. The TRC was agreed. Again, people need to remember from the ceasefire date of June until the 18th of August, there was no peace. That's when shellings began. And we began to make the agreement thanks to the wonderful General Abdusalami Abubakar, who was the mediator representing ECOWAS, who mediated the ceasefire agreement, and who also mediated the peace agreement in general. until he led an understanding between the political parties, civil society, working together with the armed groups. These three armed groups. Now they say government of Liberia, but it was in the peace agreement, was recognized as one of the armed groups.
Great. Honorable. Great. Thank you for all you did and you keep doing for Liberia. Now it's 21 years. What can Liberians take pride in that CPA?
What we can take pride in is first and foremost that Liberians can keep an agreement if it is properly done. Most times we don't say good things about ourselves. It's easier for people to just say, oh man, the Liberian way, we can't keep time. Liberian man can lie, can do all kinds of stuff. We show disrespect to ourselves. But what the CPA did is, unlike all the other armed conflicts where other armed conflicts has existed, at the end of the agreement, about 5 years later, they revert to war. There's a relapse into war again. But Liberians, in 21 years, kept the agreement.
What does that mean for the country?
For me, is the most important part that we should be proud of.
To keep the
we
peace.
Can keep agreements.
To keep the peace.
We kept the peace. Unlike what's happening in Sudan, I think the only other place in Ireland, the Irish had their issues just about our same time. They were the only people who have kept their agreement. All other agreements will break, they will relapse into conflict. In Sudan, in Somalia, just name the other places and other parts of the world.
Since
in Israel, between Israel and the Palestinians, every day there's some
noise, yeah.
But in our case, we have kept our peace for 21 years.
Wonderful. Since the signing of this CPA, how has Liberia transformed politically, socially, and economically, if you may?
Again, we have had 3 elections.
Successive elections.
And we have had those elections, and you also must remember that the armed conflicts in Liberia, the violent conflicts that we have experienced ever since the crew and whatever wars you've heard about, you may have read about, they were all linked to governance. It was all linked to elections. So the war that took place, that started in 89, was a result of elections, outcome of elections. So when we have had elections for 3 years, three elections, successive elections.
General election, but we've had all the smaller elections.
Yeah. We've had general elections, but that's the elections we're talking about.
General elections, sure.
So those general elections taught our different organizations to hold elections without violence, or even if people had disagreement, they go to the table and find a solution. So it's a key achievement for me that we have had those elections. Look at the last elections. We had a last election. The margin was small, but one of the parties accepted the outcome. Sometimes some people make it look like it was a gift. It really wasn't a gift. It was the logical thing to do, that when you have elections, somebody must win.
Sure.
It says to win, you must have 50 plus 1%
of the vote.
50% plus 1, not 51% of the vote.
50 plus 1.
50%
of the vote.
Of
total
the vote plus 1 person. Just one more person after you win 50% of the vote, you are the winner. So we did it.
How have these elections impacted our peace process?
I think I would say how have our peace process impacted the elections?
No, I want to use it all the way around.
Well, the elections, I think the fact that everybody went to the election and said, look, this election, we should accept the outcome, whomever there is. there was an election.
Mhm.
And Joe Buckeye, President Buckeye, participated. He lost. It was a joke around town that out of 15 counties, he won only in one county.
Only Lofa.
And people thought that was the end of him.
Mhm.
But he had the patience. His party had the patience and said, we go back and do it properly. And it was done, and they won. I think Liberia set a good example. After that, the party that won went into election again after 6 years.
Mhm.
And they lost, they accepted. In the next 5 years, there will be elections again.
What are other countries in the region can borrow from Liberia in terms of our peace maintenance?
I think that a good number of them have been using the Liberian example. They're talking about it. In Ghana, the election is on the way in Ghana.
Mhm.
The process is on the way. In December, Ghana will be holding its elections. And the president in power will be ending 2 consecutive terms.
Mhm.
So they will go. He will go. A new person will come. And, Nigeria had their own elections. The outcome of it we know.
Mhm.
Senegal, just the other day. So the youngest leader now in
Yeah.
Africa, elected leader, is a young man from Senegal. The elections. So elections are good. But what we are saying is that they are learning from Liberia, because Liberia is always a good pace setter.
Great.
Historically, Liberia has set a lot of examples.
Mm.
Now, so that when we're talking about our achievements,
Mhm.
we have to speak positively about ourselves and not spend all the time on the negatives.
Wonderful. I mean, it's 21 years, and like you said, we should take pride in maintaining and sustaining the peace interruptedly. But do you still see some of the creepy sounds that may have led to the conflict that brought us to where we are today?
Well, one of the things we always said was about elections. There is also the issue of justice. We are saying justice wherever wherever we smell injustice, we all must rise against it. When the justice issues we're talking about
Mhm.
includes when there is, when people get killed,
Mhm.
when somebody get killed, or public resources are stolen, and there is no proper
Do you
investigation.
still see the warning sounds?
These are warning signs.
And what indeed needs to be done to avert?
We must pursue justice. So let's say, for example, we have to follow the law, the
Mhm.
process
Mhm.
of law, even though it says leadership, is not the same as management.
Mhm.
It's not the same as being a manager.
Sure.
When you're a leader, you'll be able to shake some things. You shake some things to move forward.
Mhm.
They may sound like conflict, but you have to follow processes and show proper investigation according to the truth, according to justice.
Mhm.
So, for example, we must let's stop crying when we hear that there's a pursuit of corruption. The only thing is, it got to be done properly. But people who go to steal, a thief, for example,
Mhm.
a thief doesn't go to steal so people can catch them. They go to steal hoping that they will not be caught. So they're in pursuing corruption. If we think that everything will go as properly,
Mhm.
as properly as possible,
Mhm.
we'll try the best, but we must pursue it considering justice. And that when you steal, you ought to know
Mhm.
that one day they say how many
99
days for thief man, but
one day
for the master.
But do you still believe that the peace we enjoy is still fragile, or we've transcended far beyond that?
I think there's nothing that happens without any little doubts.
Is the peace still
But so
fragile?
far,
Is the peace still fragile?
because I have a positive view about life,
Hmm.
I think we've done a great deal. All we need to do is to do it a little more properly, and nothing is going to happen. Let's do it properly. For example, in the pursuit of corruption, let's pursue it. Let's pursue it without fear or favor.
Don't you think it will also have a dim on the peace and stability of the country?
No, 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 no.
Because mind you,
When
the people that you're going after, they do have dependence. Though,
No,
remember?
no, the conflict we have seen
Mhm.
in Liberia have never been because people were chasing a thief or people were chasing a
But
murderer.
one of the reasons why the war came was because of corruption. When 15 men were shot dead on the poles of Monrovia, and the people say, "Oh, corruption will be swept and will be gone," but it's still
The
a-
purpose.
it's still
No, no, no.
visible and be seen everywhere.
No, listen. The war
Mhm,
came.
mhm.
By the way, after the executions and the things that happened, people danced and sang in the streets. It was only when the person who won decided to cheat in elections, which
The
threatened
1985 election.
exactly. It is then that people decided that we will. Nobody came back organizing that they were going to organize a war because they killed their father.
Mhm.
Bad as it may be, but that was not the reason. It was the elections. The catalytic thing that led to that election, that led to the conflict, was how people felt cheated in the elections. There were underlying things, surely. The corruption that was in the society, there were this and that. The people made a coup.
Mhm.
They said, what was the thing? They said corruption. They said rampant corruption.
Yeah, that was a real word. Rampant.
Yeah, thank you for reading about it. Colleague, I'm thanking you for reading about
sure.
it.
Go
Yeah.
ahead. Mm.
So there was something called, they said, rampant corruption.
Injustice.
They said misuse of public funds and misuse of power.
Mhm,
All right?
mhm.
Those were the three key things I remember. And that is what they used to execute the 13 people on the polls. After that,
Mhm.
1980,
Mhm.
it took 9 years before the war erupted. And before the 9 years was the 5 years that was when elections were held. And people felt they were cheated in the elections. So the catalytic thing
Mhm.
was about justice. The catalytic thing was about governance. The catalytic thing was about people fighting against injustice.
Great. But the thing is, 21 years, there's still a lot to do. What can we do as a country to sustain this peace we've enjoyed in the last 2 decades?
I think what we must do is continue to pursue justice. Pursue justice. We must have a brave face to fight corruption. We must ensure that justice is that we pursue justice. I don't know how else to put it. You see, there was an organization, there is an organization you probably read about that is called Movement for
For
Justice
in Africa. Moja.
The
Dr.
big,
Tibote.
the
I
big
can
debate around it,
Mhm,
and President Torba wrote a letter
mhm.
to become a member of this, was because President Torba believed
Injustice?
that what was being talked about justice was the best way to run the country properly. So justice is key in the things that we are planning to do or plan to do.
You think is an enabler to sustaining this peace?
The peace is on the course, and I think we must continue to pursue justice around it. Take, for example, let me just look what happened in the case when government go to the courts
Mhm.
and go abuse an associate justice or member of the Supreme Court bench
Mhm.
illegally remove this person from the bench. When you do that, this is where you look for trouble, because this person this is where you're talking about person having relatives and friends. You see, people don't go fighting for people who kill. I mean, who steal. People don't go fighting. Even your brother, when they bring stealing business on your brother, you want to be careful,
Yeah, sure.
because the police will hold you. But if somebody comes to kill you or illegally removes your brother from office, from a position, for whatever, you want an investigation into why this person is being removed illegally. So the case of the court, the impact on Liberia was significant. And the gentleman who was affected, Justice Jane, did not go to war. There were people who came around and say, you know, they think it's against Mandingo people and those against Muslims, against this. He said, heck no, I'm going to pursue it consistent with law. So he went, after failing with our Supreme Court,
he went to ECOWAS.
He went to ECOWAS court. The ECOWAS rendered judgment in his favor. That's why he's working, he's teaching law school, he's practicing law. Yet, the government has not found it fit to respect the ECOWAS decision. The previous government of Mr. Weah and this current government, I think it would be one of the most courageous thing to do, to say that ECOWAS that stood with us when we went into war, where men and women, young men and women from ECOWAS countries died for us to have this peace. When their court that we are part of, when that court takes a decision, we should respect the court.
I mean,
so that's one example. We have the case going on now, you know, with Justice, the former Chief Justice, who was accused and convicted in the lower court, and whose case is now before the Supreme Court. Quite a bit of the evidence is available. I mean, absolutely, we would say no evidence. But what has she been doing? And her lawyers, a team of lawyers, some of the best lawyers in the Republic, came together and went to court. They went to the lower court. They went to the Supreme Court. The woman is in detention. She has been sentenced to death. She is in jail, but the case is before the... So we're following the law. This is the way to maintain this peace. When people commit crimes, for example, I mean, look, listen, we have to give account. Sometimes the shame, there's a big shame, you know, when you own things that you cannot account for. You know, what lesson we tell our children when suddenly you find, coming and we say, he has these huge buildings that he has built. He say he's built. And I cannot explain to my children how
did you accumulate the wealth?
In my lifetime, how did I manage? And some of the people younger, maybe about your age, you know, how do they go home to their parents? Because their parents are alive. Some don't even want to speak to their parents because their parents say, don't do it. But when we were children, when you went to school and you came home with a pen or a pencil that you didn't carry, your mother tell you, your mother will ask you where you got this.
Of course, yes.
And then you will carry it back. And maybe they'll accompany you the next day.
And that's the moral thing you're talking about.
Today, if we don't have that, something is fundamentally wrong with our society that could undermine the peace. And that is the challenge we have.
I mean, as we speak, what do you see as the current challenges facing Liberia in maintaining this long-term peace and stability here on?
Emmanuel, you asking the same question.
Yes,
Iran.
I know that's something.
I know that yesterday I was in church and the pastor said there were certain things in the Bible that are repeated several times. For it is for a purpose.
Of course.
Or like when Proverbs 6 and in it where they say there's 6 or 7 sins that God hates the most. It says 6 and 7. This the reason they say 6 and 7 is because just the one that has to do with lies have been repeated twice in the Bible. They say God does not like for you to tell false witness against thy neighbor. Then he goes around it and he says something again about just lying and your lies and the conflict it creates in society. So there are some things that are repeated. So I understand why you're repeating the question. The question for you, what can we do? I say we should pursue.
My question was, what do you see as the current challenges facing Liberia in maintaining this long-term peace and stability that we enjoy as a country? Said,
our challenge is ensuring justice. Yes, look.
Okay.
Our justice system. We need a great deal of that. We need to ensure that whatever we're doing towards choosing our leaders, that is done fairly and fairly and justly. We are saying that whether somebody is accused of killing or stealing, let them have their day in court. I mean, there are times that it will be rigid. We must be rigid in pursuit of it, because guy who steal and have stolen plenty, they can bribe everybody. They can bribe the police officer coming to them, going to do. So there will be some rigidity in the process, no doubt about it. One of the people who in some trouble, you see how God works in many ways. I remember we're in a meeting just before, about 2 or 3 weeks before the late you see, we had Mrs. Sirleaf's son who was in the central bank.
Charles Sirleaf?
Charles. I remember 2 weeks before they arrested him, one of the ministers who was responsible told me that they were going to do everything to disgrace that woman. And we started with her son.
Wow.
What did they do? They say $16 billion was stolen, and they had it in their bags, in hiding places, and they went something that has never happened in Liberia. They went to the bank, handcuffed Charles, and carried him to the central prison. I mean, to the police station. I went there, and all I could tell Charles, don't worry, the day will come. The people who are doing this, they know their day will come, and there will be worse. Sometimes you won't die, but you'll feel the pain for a long time. I'm not calling names, but people who are affected, just small, they want a little bit. We ain't grow far yet. They were bragging what they were going to do.
That you are saying the issue of getting justice. So talking about justice, it drove me to ask about this whole war and economic crimes court, because it was because of the war that this whole CBA came about, and you've been one of those voices loud talking about calling for the court to be established. The court versus the maintenance of the peace. What's the correlation there?
Collie, Emmanuel, then you hear me, because I'm not one of the loudest. I was one of those who in Accra calling for the court.
That's what I'm saying. You want a lot of voices.
Wait, then. And then we had a meeting. After 3 months sitting down and we were not making progress. I remember, I have to repeat the story again. General Abdul Salami Abu Bakar called me this night in Accra and say, because I was one of the leaders of the civil society groups calling for this the most. So he called me in his hotel room. It was past midnight. We were together for almost up to about 3 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And the Ome told me the story about, he said, look, a soldier man
Mm-hmm.
without gun is no soldier. He said, in Biafra, we had a war. In Nigeria, we fought a war, the federal government against Eastern, what they call Biafra, what was called Biafra.
Yeah, Biafra. Yeah.
Okay. And this war wasn't ending. And people were being killed.
Mm-hmm.
There was Ojukwu with his forces. There was Gowon.
I was just asking you about.
So I'm listening to you.
Where do you stand in terms of maintaining the peace?
Yeah, but
and going
first thing
after
to say,
people who
I just want to correct you.
prior
was
to the
then told
CPA.
I came
Mr.
back
Wuse,
from that meeting.
Of a different mind.
I came back when he told me, we've been here for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
You are saying that you want an agreement that will say that all these warring factions, they should sign onto a paper, and then when we are done, then they'll go to court.
Mm-hmm.
And then they committed crimes against humanity and we'll shoot them.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you want? You're not going to have it. We are fed up with you Liberians. He said, President Tottenham, when we were in our Biafra war, he invited the two sides to Liberia. It was here that Tottenham told them, you guys go back. Don't make no promises or threats to put Ojukwu in jail or to jail and kill Ojukwu. That's how the war ended. That's Liberia's contribution to that war, ending of that war. You have to listen and make sure that the object of this meeting is not to say how many people we're going to put in jail after the meeting has ended. So the compromise will be the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This is what the people in South Africa use to end their conflict.
Okay.
And therefore, we came back and we set up the TRC. The TRC was part of the agreement from the CPA, and the NTLA, the National Transitional Legislative Assembly, that actually legalized and legally created the CPA. I mean the TRC. I chaired that committee.
Okay.
In the NTLA. I know the debates we went in that meeting. In the NTLA, no decision was going to be made unless you had 2/3 majority vote. The majority, the 1/3 members of the NTLA were from the warring factions. That means the Chancellor government people, the Lord and Model. They constituted 1/3. And unless you had one person breaking grounds, you would never have one law passed in the NTLA. So there could never have been a TRC law that will say in it that we are going to set up a war crimes court. The confusion that is going on right now will continue. The first confusion.
But do you support the establishment of this court?
I do not.
You do not?
I do not.
You just talk about justice.
But you see, our whole sense of justice, justice mean that you have to have a court. That's when you have justice.
And that's what the process is on.
In your home.
So ensuring that people who committed atrocities can account for their actions or inaction.
No. The process we agreed to in the act creating the TRC had a process. And this is the process we agree will constitute justice.
This was one of the TRC recommendations for the establishment of the court.
I'm saying to you, that was not in the law creating the TRC. That was not what
was
in
recommend
the law.
That this could be established?
Sorry?
did the TRC report recommend that this law be this code be
Well,
established?
that's the interpretation that people have given to it. And I just want
So
it
why
clear.
don't you support this whole process
I've just said to
war?
you, I work too hard for us to have the peace.
So
I
you
worked
think
very hard. And I think
mhm.
that, and one of the things that kept us is because we held on to our agreement. And the agreement
what's your
we
fear?
held
What's your
for
fear?
21 years.
What's your fear?
My fear is if we break our own agreements, we'll have trouble down the road.
Is that why you vision?
What I know is that you must keep an agreement. We had an agreement. No, I didn't.
Why are you not
I'm not one of the
cause?
leaders of any of the warring factions.
But what's your fear?
I'm not afraid.
Yeah, but
I'm just on justice. Again, we had an agreement. You must keep the agreement. Do you understand?
Did the agreement say you should not prosecute former warlords?
That's not my understanding. You see, to prosecute, the first thing, you see the process we're going through now, is you're going to have trouble creating the committee. Listen, to create the individual and the committee that will...
Yeah, that will steer the affair to ensuring the code is established. It's just the office.
The office to set it up. See the misinterpretation, including people who were guarantors of the peace agreement. The peace agreement, you probably need to know, had guarantors. The warring factions insisted on certain people to be guarantors of the peace agreement. The peace agreement, the Interreligious Council was a guarantor. The Liberian National Bar Association was a guarantor. The Liberian Leadership Forum that I headed was a guarantor. The Mano River Women Peace Network was a guarantor with Mrs. Teresa Lee Sherman. The Liberians in the diaspora, all the Liberians who were living abroad were guarantors, and the civil society movement of Liberia were guarantors. These were the 6. On the international level, there were other 6 groups. The mediator representing ECOWAS, he was the mediator for that everybody agreed to. The UN, Dr. Ambassador Abdullah signed. ECOWAS, Dr. Chambers. African Union, Ambassador Coleman.
Yeah, so I know the list is long.
No, it's not long.
I was just asking.
It's not long.
I know.
You are only 26 years old. You must have the patience to read these things, and then you see the
reason why I keep dragging.
So there are only 6.
Yes,
the EU. The EU was co-chair of the International Contact Group, and Ghana was co-chair. By that time, the co-chair was the foreign minister of Ghana at that time, who is now president of Ghana.
Great.
So you see, you stood up as guarantors for the agreement. And now time for the implementation that we have implemented in 21 years, you say, no, we now want War Crimes Code. We cannot even agree among ourselves who should chair the War Crimes Code committee. Then we're setting up a committee that we want all these organizations that were guarantors for the CPA to be part of the creation process.
You think what will happen if this code is established in Liberia?
Well, I know that they set up a code in Sierra Leone.
I just asking what you think will happen if this code is established.
$100 million was spent. Sierra Leone depended on other people to put up that money. And we are looking for our roles and this and that. If you think that setting up the code will solve all the problems, you are begging the Chinese. They are trying to build your
no, I don't want you to be specific. I was just asking a very direct question.
I do not agree. I think it does not support what I believe in, that I believe very strongly that we must deal with with this matter, according to the agreement we had.
Okay, so
No,
we'll
listen
take,
to me.
let's just take a few
Listen.
calls. We have few minutes to go. I just want to have a public participation, maybe 2 or 3 calls. Go have less than 5 minutes to go. So you get your parting comment. Let me just interact with the public a bit.
Please.
0770567764. This is the bumper show. We have former River G County Senator Community. We say one of the signatories to the Accra Comprehensive Peace Agreement in 2003. Let me talk to this person. It's good to have you. Go ahead. Good evening. Welcome to the show. Hello.
Good evening, Emmanuel calling.
Please be verified. We have less minutes to go.
I'm Steven Zaka from Zeruske.
How is with you?
Relatively simple.
Yeah, 30 seconds, please.
You make my day by asking the senator that troubling question. Because this is the same senator who told about TRC was not made for court. But hearing saying it is good to pursue justice, and then seeing struggling with your question, I think he make my day. My question to him is, he being a signatory to the peace accord that we are enjoying today, and listening to him that you, at the time Charles said he was incarcerated, he went to meeting and he made a cutting remark saying the same thing that boy here who made up with those who brought you here. Is he telling us that the CDC-led government was in the wrong? Thank you very much.
Thank you. 0770567764. This is the Bumper Show. My name is Emmanuel Colley. Keep the calls coming in. I mean, the calls has frozen my phone. I'm like, gosh. Oh my God. Let me see what I can screen. Okay. Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My name is Carl from WC now.
Go ahead. We have 30 seconds.
To the issue, I think main studio we said for his explanation. But the question that you asked is that it's not in the recommendation of the TRC report that the war is established. That question he answered.
It's not there.
He said it's not there. He said it's not in the recommendation. We have
no recommendation in the law.
Thank you. We'll take one more call and go back to you, Senator, for your reaction, and then we can call you a day today on the Bumper Show. 0770567764. You were just asking, one of the callers was asking about why you think the code is not necessary when in fact you are a champion of justice, because I mean that's confusion there. Please, your name and where you join us.
Good evening, how you doing?
Please, I'm fine. Go ahead, please. 30 seconds.
George calling from Corwell. You hear me?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to know regarding the progressive, because about the progressive. We've been hearing that the progressive where they instructed PRC government to kill the 13 people on a pool. I need to comment on it.
Okay, thank you. This is our last caller. Hello.
Yeah, fine.
Please, 15 seconds, please.
Yeah, it's Edmund calling from Nima.
Where Edmund from Nima?
Okay, I want to appreciate the video, but I want to say clearly, it is in the TRC report as a recommendation that the economic plan could be established in Liberia. Senator will go back.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, I can't take any more call. Senator, we have to go. We have like a minute to leave from here. Just sum everything and then we can call you a day.
Well, I mean, first of all, the gentleman started with Charles Salif arrest. I mean, the government found that they wronged the man and they compensated him. They compensated him for his wrongful arrest. He committed no crime.
Okay.
The CDC government. The progressive director PRC, the PRC, that's not true.
Okay.
Absolutely not. We always fought for justice, and that was justice.
Okay.
The other one, I don't know how many times I need to say it, that there is a law. They must read. You see, like calling you reading. Read what the TRC Act says. read what the peace agreement says. We are going to organize. In fact, we're going to do many things to help our people. Before you talk in the public, understand the issues, know what you are talking about.
Okay.
Otherwise, you'll be misled. Somebody just go and talk. You may war crimes code.
Thank you.
You were not even born when we signed a peace agreement.
Thank you so much, former
thank
Senator
you.
River G County Community Wisa has been my guest today on the Bumper Show. My name is Emmanuel Kali. I will be here on Wednesday. Until then, up next is the news, and of course, thank you and have a good Monday.